Good morning. We're learning Good Shabbos. Fortunately, we heard the news today about the passing of a great giant in Torah, Rabbi Steinzeitz, who translated the entire Talmud.
Right.
And
into
I think it was
Hebrew.
Wrote 60 books, and I think he worked 45 years to write commentary on, not just commentary, but also explaining the Talmud. So the learning, a lot of people who learn Daf Yomi is nischus.
Right. I have
Many, a lot of the books being used, at least in he was the pioneer of explaining the Talmud. And was also connected to the Rebbe as a great chassid. I think the Rebbe himself encouraged him with his work.
Yeah.
So he should be a Melitz Yeshiv, Am Yisrael, ambassador of goodness and kindness for everyone, and push for Mashiach.
Amen. Speedily in our days.
Our learning, make sure learning should be in his schus. So he doesn't need a schus; he has a lot of schusim,
Yeah,
but
we need his
schus. But it's definitely for his schus. So, but it's not just the Talmud. He wrote
Kabbalah, Kabbalah, lots of good stuff. I mean, not that I read it, but I know you can go look on Amazon. He probably has a lot on Amazon.
So we'll start with the Mishnah in 155. It says, "Matirim peki omer lifnei ve'ema." One may untie bundles of straw before an animal. U'mefas besines hakifin, and one may scatter kifin for it. What is a pekin and what is kifin? We're soon going to see. Avalo is hazirin, not zazirin. So you look at number 12. It says, pekin denotes a type of bundle of straw. Okay, type of bundle of straw. A more precise definition of this term, as well as of the terms kipin and zirin that we're going to see soon, which follow in the Mishnah, will be given in the Gemara. One may untie these bundles on the Shabbos so that the animal may easily eat them. If you notice, with animal feed, a lot of it comes in a bulk. It's a box, square hay, and it's hard for the animal to eat it like that. So you break it, break it apart for her. So one may untie these bundles on Shabbos so that the animal may easily eat them. Umefasfasin es a kipin, and one may scatter kipin for it. So what is kipin? It says in 13, normally when one gives these bundles to an animal, when you feed it to an animal, one scatters them first in order to render them more appetizing. It's like setting the table for the animal. If they are packed together, they become warm and fail to release much of a scent. As a result, the animal find them unpalatable. They don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually entices them to eat this food. Avalo es hazirin, but not zirin. So we see that we read before, a more precise definition of kipin and zirin will be given the Gemara. So we'll see soon what zirin exactly is. En meraskin lo es hashachas, v'lo es charuvin lifnei beima. One may shred neither fodder nor carbs before an animal. not allowed to shred them before an animal, not carbs and not fodder. Bein dako uvein gaso, whether it is a small animal or a large animal. Rabbi Yehuda matir b'charuv nedako. Rabbi Yehuda permits the shredding of carbs for a small animal. Okay, we'll go into 155a2. Amar Ravuna. Ravuna said, Hein pekin, hein kifin. He said that pekin and kifin are identical, and they're both animal food. What do we call it? A bundle of straw.
Yeah.
Both terms denotes bundles of straw. Pekin terei. Pekin are bundles tied twice. Kipin tloso. Kipin, they're tied 3 times. Okay? The issue that we have at hand is, am I allowed to untie it before the animal on Shabbos? Zirin, the arze, zirin, on the other hand, refers to cedar boughs. What cedar boughs? Boughs, cedar boughs.
You would know it, but that's what it is.
What cedar boughs? It says in 19, these are moist branches pruned from a cedar tree, as long as they refrain their moistness, they are fit for animal food. Most people, however, leave them dry for fuel. So, moist branches pruned from a cedar tree. Okay? It's branches that are still moist, they're not dry yet.
Right.
So as long as they retain their moistness, they are fit for animal food. Most people, however, leave them to dry for fuel. They throw them into the fire.
Right.
Regarding whether these cedar boughs are muktzeh on the Shabbos, since they are ear-marked for fuel, and if so, how they can be handled to feed an animal. It's like charcoals.
Yeah.
Not touch charcoals on Shabbos, because the melacha that is being done with it is forbidden.
I think that's just what we like the makshava on the side.
Zirin, the arze, zirin, on the other hand, refers to cedar boughs, and this is what the Mishnah means. One may untie pekin. Doubly bound bundles. As we said before, that it's tied, it's bundled, tied twice. That's the pekin. And the same applies to kifin, triply, meaning it's triple bound, bundles of straw. But why not these cedar boughs? Neither in regard to scattering, nor in regard to untying. So, matirin is untying, mefaspesin is scattering. So when it comes to kifin and zirin, bundles of straw that are tied twice or 3 times, you're allowed to untie them and scatter them. When it comes to zirin, which is cedar boughs, those moist branches of a cedar tree that animals can eat, but it's also, I guess it's primarily being used for fuel, you are not allowed to untie and are not allowed to scatter. Lo lefaspes lo latir. According to Ravuna, one may untie and scatter both kinds of bundles of straw, but one may not, but one may do neither with bundles of cedar boughs. Amar Rav Chizda, my time Ravuna. What is Rav Huna's reasoning? He contends that one may exert himself to improve an existing food, but one may not make a non-food item into food.
23.
What is it I didn't understand? Think about what we just read.
No,
if you take food and you're improving the food, he's saying it's fine.
No,
but if you make something from unedible to edible, that's already from a state of non-food to a state of food. Right, it's a problem.
I got that, but I'm wondering where he's going with. Okay, so the first stanza 23. As noted before, cedar boughs are usually left for fuel and are not normally considered animal feed. So therefore, it's considered looks at and therefore.
So when one unties and scatters a bunch of cedar boughs for an animal, he is thereby converting it into food.
Right. So that's.
Also, one may not make a non-food substance into food on the Shabbos.
Okay. Now.
He may only enhance something already considered food.
So straw is considered food, and
whether it's tied one time or 2 times or 3 times, it's still considered food.
Okay, now I got it.
But these cedar boughs, they're charcoals primarily.
Right. So therefore, you can't do that. Okay.
That's at least this is the opinion
of.
From
Rav Huna.
That's the reasoning of Rav Huna.
Okay.
That's how Rav Chizda explains Rav Huna's position.
Okay.
Rabbi Yehuda Omar, ein pekin, ein zirin. Pekin are identical to zirin. Notice he doesn't say pekin are identical to kifin; they are identical to zirin.
Right.
Pekin, 3. Zirin tloso. Pekin are bound twice. Zirin are bound 3 times. Keeping the other, keeping are, and he says keeping are cedar boughs, and this is what the Mishnah means. You are allowed to untie pekin, which is a doubly bound bundles of straw before an animal, but one may not scatter them. And kifin cedar boughs, one may even scatter as well as untie. But this leniency does not apply to zirin, because zirin is triply bound bundles of straw in regard to scattering. Rather, it applies to them only in regard to untying.
So you just untie them, you don't throw them around. So wait a minute, then they got back to the cedar boughs.
No, so according to Rav Yehuda, let me just say the reasoning of Rav Yehuda, and then we'll explain.
Okay,
fine. What's the reasoning of Rav Yehuda? He says, he maintains that one may make food edible for an animal on Shabbos, make it edible for them, but one may not exert oneself for the mere enhancement of animal food. So you said you're allowed to make food for them, but you shouldn't be enhancing it. Rav Huna says the other way around. Rav Huna said, according to Rav Chizda, you can enhance it, but you're not allowed to make it, to turn it into food.
Right.
It's like I'm not allowed to turn potato into something edible.
Yeah.
But if it's already edible, but I'm only adding salt and pepper to it, then I'm allowed to. That's according to what we just saw. But Rav Yehuda, first of all, changed the explanation or the translation of what pekin is, what zirin is. He says it's something completely different. Look, for example, he said pekin and zirin is identical. We said before that zirin is cedar boughs, right? What is zirin? Pekin, trei, keeping closer. We said pekin is 2. It's tied twice. Kifin is tied 3 times, and zirin is cedar boughs, right? We put cedar boughs in a different category.
Rabbi Yehuda said pekin.
And Rabbi Yehuda says that pekin and zirin is the same thing, right?
Yeah.
He's saying something completely different than what Rav Huna said.
Yeah.
So because that he changes the definition of what zirin is, he also tells you that you're allowed to use it. What you're not allowed to use? He said you're not allowed to use kifin. Why can't you use kipin? It's a pay, kipin. So why can't you use the kipin? Because he said that kipin to him is the cedar boughs. What does it say? V'chipin. He says matir peki omer ifnei ve'ema, but pasuk say no. So what is zirin to him? Zirin to him is bundles that are tied 3 times. Keeping the arze, and he says keeping is the cedar boughs. We learned before that keeping is just bundles of straw. Comes Rav Yehuda and he says no, keeping is cedar boughs. And he says, what do you do? What do you do with it? So he said, you're allowed to untie it, but you should not spread them. You should not scatter them. Okay? V'chipin paspus inam paspusina, and keep in cedar boughs one may even scatter. So, if we summarize what Rav Yehuda is telling us, Rav Yehuda is taking pekin and zirin and says that they are one and the same thing. They're both bundles of straw. Pekin is 2, zirin is 3. What is kipin? Kipin, he says, kipin is the cedar boughs. Now, how do I handle it on Shabbos? Rav Yehuda said you shouldn't touch it. Yeah. He says you're allowed to untie it, but you cannot scatter them.
No,
okay?
He says you can scatter the cedar things.
Right, said you're allowed to untie, but you're not allowed to scatter.
And keep in cedar boughs. The second line from the.
Oh, you're talking about Rav Huna, or you're talking about Rav Yehuda? No, Rav Yehuda says
is the opposite.
Untie. One may untie
and scatter.
But one may not scatter them.
No.
I'm talking about pekim. It says, Matirim peki omer lifne be'am paspusei loy. One may untie pekin, doubly bound bundles, or straw before, but one may not scatter them.
Then next.
V'chipin, and when it comes to keeping, the cedar boughs, you can do both.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the opposite of Rav Huna.
Correct. But when it comes to zirin, which is according to him, zirin is triply bound. Even also according to Rav Huna, zirin is triply bound. He said you can untie, right? You can you're allowed to untie, but you're not allowed to scatter.
Okay, that's like
so.
A nice chart from this.
But the point is that you have to look at the reasonings, and the reasoning is Rav Huna says that you're allowed to exert yourself to improve existing food,
but not to make it.
Not to make food,
and
not to turn food, non-food item into food item. And to him, according to Rav Chisda and Rav Huna, a non-food item is those cedar boughs. They're not considered food items to him.
Right. So
therefore, you're not allowed to mess with them at all.
And then Rav Yehuda says you can make food, but you can't enhance the food.
Right.
So that's how we got back to the use of spreading out.
Make food. One may make food edible for animal on Shabbos. One may not exert himself for the mere enhancement of animal food.
Okay, now we got what both rabbis are saying. Okay, next.
Tenan, we'll learn to know Mishnah and Meraskins Hashachas Lachun. One may not shred either fodder or carobs before an animal.
Carobs.
Yeah, carobs, the carobs tree, charuvim.
Right. Boxer.
Bein dakov and gaso, whether it is a small animal or large animal. Ma'elav charuvim dumya the shachas. What is the Mishnah's case? We are not speaking of carobs that analogous to fodder. Ma shachas de rakiche, just as fodder is normally tender. Av charuvim de rakiche, so too the carobs referred to here are tender and moist and are therefore already suitable for animal food. Yet the Mishnah teaches that one may not shred them. Alma lo terchin beuchla. This is actually a strengthening or proving the point of Rabbi Yehuda, because it says loy terchin beuchla. We see from this halacha that you shouldn't be shredding the carobs, that one may not exert oneself to merely enhance animal food. Usyuv to the Ravuna, and this is a refutation to Ravuna. Ravuna said you're allowed to enhance. Over here we see that you should not be enhancing. So Ravuna would answer you. Ravuna could answer you. Ravuna could tell you, Amalach Ravuna loy. This is not the case of our Mishnah. What happened? Shachas dume de charuvin. We're speaking of fodder just analogous to carobs. Ma mercharuvin dakushe, just as carobs are commonly hard. Av shachas dakush, so too the fodder mentioned here is hard for the animal to eat and requires some softening. Heichi mashkachas la, and where do you find a case of fodder that is too hard for a large animal's consumption? Be'ilei zutre, regarding young donkeys, for which even regular fodder is too hard for them.
Okay.
It says in 26, the fodder requires shredding in order to transform it into food. Making an item into food, according to Rav Huna, is forbidden. Tashma.
So what do they do with this young donkey? You have to shred it for them.
Yeah, you have to give it something that's capable of digesting.
Right. Otherwise, it's not going to eat on Shabbos. Okay.
So they gave you an example of fodder that is not edible for a certain animal.
Right.
Which animal? It's the
Young donkey.
It's the young donkey. Tashma, come learn. Rabbi Yehuda mati b'charuvin ledako. Rabbi Yehuda permits the shredding of carobs for small animals. Gemara says ledako ein. Legaso for a small animal, yes. For a large animal, no. Iyamot b'shlema, now this is fine if you maintain, as does the Amei Rabbi Yehuda. Tanakama sover mitra b'uchalot achina. The Tanakama holds that we may not exert ourselves to enhance food. Shavui mashvinan, but we may make food edible. Ainu the Kama Rabbi Yehuda. That explains what Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana, said. Hecharuvin ledako nami shavuye uchlahu. The shredding of carobs for a small animal should also be considered making food edible. Here, this answers your question. However, if you will say, as Avuna explained, that we are dealing with hard carobs, Tanakama sovar shavuye uchla lo mashvina mitach b'uchla tarchina. The Tanakama holds we may not make food, but we may exert ourselves improving food. Rabbi Yehuda demati b'chovin ledako. Then how do you account for the fact that Rabbi Yehuda, in the conclusion of the Mishnah, who permits the shredding of hard carobs for a small animal, is implying a small animal, yes, but a large animal, no. But if Rabbi Yehuda's point is that the shredding of hard carobs is merely an enhancement, kol sheken agaso, then this should certainly be true for a large animal. Yet Rabbi Yehuda specifically exclude large animals. Mi sovat dako. Do you think that when Rabbi Yehuda says dako mamesh, he means a small animal literally? No, my dako. What does he mean by dako? Gaso, a large animal. V'amai korelo dako. Why does he call a large animal dako? The daiko b'uchlo. He says because it's medakdik. It's a large animal chews its food very well. I guess the whole idea of chewing its cud, that older animals, they chew better.
Yeah, bigger animals.
Bigger animals, they chew better. So since we learned the first part of the Mishnah, the Tanakama's words as follows: whether it is a small animal or whether it is a large animal, we may conclude that when Rabbi Yehuda speaks of dako mamish komar, he is referring to a small animal. Dako, literally. Kasha, this is indeed a difficulty. If you look at number 33, it says, "See Shabbos shel mi." I guess the further discussion on this. Tashma, mechatchin, one may cut up es adluin lifnei be'ema ve'es nevelo lifnei klovim, gourds before animal, a carcass before dogs. Ma elav adluin dume de nevela, ma nevela derkicha adluin derkicha. Just a nevela is soft. Also, when it comes to gourds, they are soft. Amatarchin be'uchla usivza de Rabbi Yehuda we see that you are taking the extra mile. We are exerting ourselves when it comes to food. So this is a machlokes to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that we may not, one may not expend such effort. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, nevela dumid luin. Nevela carcass is similar to gourds. Madluim dashuni af nevela dashuna. Just as gourds are tough, so too the carcass is tough and must be cut up to be eaten. And what do you find? And where do you find such a case? Bevasar pile, in the elephant meat, which is tough for any dog. Or alternatively, in the case of regular meat that is being fed to small puppies who cannot eat it without it being cut up. So one may crumble straw and fodder, oven, and mix them together. The straw and the fodder are edible without crumbling. Yet the Brisa says you're allowed to do it. So this is actually showing that you're allowed to enhance it. Apparently one may exert himself to merely improve an already edible animal food. The straw we are speaking is somewhat spoiled straw. And the fodder requires crumbling because in the Brisa's case the fodder is being fed to young donkeys who cannot eat it without crumbling. And since the fodder is crumbled, the straw will not mix with it unless it is crumbled as well. Both the straw and the fodder must be crumbled in order to be edible. So even when it comes to animals, you see that there's a lot of mixing being done for them to be able to eat.
My cats, they like one kind of food, and then they like the ones that are like soupy, and then the ones that were solid, they don't like the solid ones.
So they're picky also. And also since Agomo, one may not stuff a camel with a dersi, and may not nor may he cram it. Aval mal eating, but he may put food down his throat. Vein mamir sargolim also may not fatten calves. Aval mal eating, but one may put food down their throat. Umelaktin tanegolim, one may force feed chickens. Also, and one may put water into their bran. Avaloi goivlim, but one may not knead the bran and water together. One may not place water before bees or before doves in a dove coat. But one may place water before geese, chickens, and Herodian pigeons.
Yeah.
My ein oivsin. What is the meaning? One may not stuff. One may not make a veritable trough. Veritable trough. Avus in its belly. Mika ki gavno. Is it possible to stuff an animal to such an extent? I saw an Arab merchant, the Ichla Kura Vatina Kor, who fed his camel an entire core of food and then loaded it with an additional core of provisions for the way. So we see that it's possible. Ein mamir, but one may not fatten calves, but one may put food down the throat. What does it mean? Which actions are termed fattening and which termed putting food down their throats? Fattening into an area of an animal's throat that is so far back that the animal cannot bring the food back up. Putting food down their throat is an area where the animal can still bring the food back up. Both Amro and Aloto speaks about a place where you can no longer bring it back. The difference between Amro, fattening, and Aloto, putting food down their throat, is one is done with a kli, with a vessel, with a utensil, and an implement, and Aloto is being done by hand. It emerges that according to Rabbi Yehuda, one may not feed an animal on Shabbos by placing food in its throat so far back that it cannot bring it back up. According to Rabbi Chizda, however, it is permitted so long as it is not done with a kli, with an implement. Mosiv Rav Yosef, Melaktin Latarnegolim, one may force feed chickens. V'entzerich Lamoshe Melakitin, certainly one may feed them. Ve'en Malakitin De'en Yeshevach U'Lein Aliyah. However, one may not feed dovecote doves or attic doves. V'entzerich Lamoshe Mehalaktin, and certainly one may not force feed them. What is meant here by force feeding, and what is meant by feeding? If you say that mehalkitin the soifel be'adayim, force feeding refers to when you do it by hand, the birds by placing food down their throat by hand. Malkitin the shoel kamayu, and feeding refers to when he simply throws the food in front of them. That implies that when it comes to doves and attic doves, even throwing food in front of them is not allowed, but certainly cannot be. Force feeding entails putting the food by hand in an area of the chicken's throat that it can no longer bring the food back up. Malkitin is referring to feeding it in a place where it could still bring it back up, still bring the food back up. But that implies that fattening, which our Mishnah forbids, must refer to something even more forceful, namely force feeding the animal with an implement to Sivta de Rabbi Yehuda, and then it's a refutation of the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Amalach Rabbi Yehuda, really force feeding is when he places food down their throats by hand. Malakitin the shoel kamayu, and feeding is when he throws it in front of the birds with a kakashilach. And as to that which was difficult for you to understand, dovecotes, doves, and attic doves, even the throwing of food in front of them is not allowed. The reasoning is as follows: these creatures that one is permitted to feed, chickens, depend upon you for their feed. They're locked in a coop. How do you? They need you to give them food. When it comes to doves, they're more free and they don't need you. One may place food before the dog, but one may not place food before a pig. Why are you allowed to put food before the dog and not before the pig? When it comes to dog, depends upon you for its food. It's your dog. When it comes to a pig, it does not depend upon you for its food. It says in 28, the sages pronounced a curse upon any Jew who raises a pig. Since one is forbidden to raise pigs, the feeding of a pig can never be considered the Jew's responsibility.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
One may not place water before bees or before doves in a dovecote. One may place water before geese, chickens, and Herodian doves. My time. What's the reason? Maybe we can say the same thing. These are it's your responsibility when it comes to chicken and doves and geese, and when it comes to bees and doves are not. That's not your responsibility. Chicken and geese are your responsibility. And for what reason does our Mishnah refer only to water? Even wheat and barley should not be given to dovecote doves, since they can forage on their own.
Right.
It says whether it is possible that our Mishnah does not subscribe to this view, and water is different because water is available. Food may not necessarily be available to them. What is the meaning? The righteous. This is a pasuk in Proverbs 29:7. It says, Hashem Yedei Tzadik, the Tzadik knows, the righteous one knows the suffering of the poor. Hashem knows that a dog's food is typically meager. It's very little. Therefore, decreed that a dog's food should linger in its belly for 3 days. It would stay in its belly for 3 days. How long may a living creature food linger and still be considered tameh? Regarding a dog, the time limit is 24 hours period. Regarding to birds or fish, The time limit is Kedesh Tipul over self, as long as it would take the food to fall into a fire and become consumed.
Yeah, birds and fish, they're always eating.
Amar Amnuna Shmamina learned from this. It is proper to throw a chunk of meat to a stray dog. And how much? How large should the chunk be? Throw it a chunk the size of its ear, followed immediately by the wrap of a stick. It says in 35, the chunk should be a small one, as large as its ear, and one should immediately drive it away with a stick so that it should not begin to tag after its benefactor. Should not continue begging you for food. This is so only in the desert. However, in the city, one should not throw it any meat. Because it will tend to tag along. There is no creature poorer than a dog, and there is no creature wealthier than a pig. It says any kind of food is suitable for a pig, so it comes by its meals easily. Furthermore, people are accustomed to feed it abundantly. This is a similar question that we asked before. What's the difference between fattening and putting down the throat? Fattening denotes that one brings the animal to its knees, props open its mouth so that the animal cannot close it, and feeds it vetch and water at the same time. When it comes to al-oto, putting food down its throat denotes to doing it while he is standing, and also giving it and waters it when he's drinking. He gives it vetch separately and water separately. One may put food down the throat when it comes to chickens, and one may put water into their bran, but one may not need the bran and water together. Apparently maintains that pouring water into bran is not a violation of the malacha of kneading. If one person contributes the flour and another person contributes the water, the last one is liable for violating the malacha of kneading. These are the words of Rabbi Yisrael said, he is not liable for kneading until he actually kneads the mixture manually, until he kneads it makes it into a dough. Rabbi Yisrael, disputing Rabbi, says that it's specifically for flour. The var gibulu, which is kneadable and can be formed into a dough. Aval musan, however, regard to bran, the lav var gibulu, which is not kneadable. Perhaps even Rabbi Yisrael would agree that simply adding water to the bran is forbidden as an act of kneading. Lo sakadaitach, it should not enter your mind to make such distinction. Tanya be'edyo, it was taught in the Brayso explicitly. Enoziman musan, one may not put water into bran. These are the words of Rabbi Yisrael. You're allowed to put water into bran. Tanu Abon Gavim Sakoli, one may need toasted grain flour with water on the Shabbos, Hashem Gavim, and some say that one may need it. My Yeshemim, who is the Man de Omar, and some say, who is the Samsam of Chisda, Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda, there's a son of Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda who maintains that merely adding water to flour is not considered kneading. One is liable only for kneading the ingredients manually into a dough-like mass, and in this case, he permits even manual kneading. However, this is permitted only provided that he does it b'shinui, he deviates from the normal manner of kneading. Bruchim Tiu.